Ürün yönetimi eğitimlerimize Üretim Bandı adıyla başladık ve şimdi Brick Institute markası altında devam ediyor. Brick Institute'da sektörün lider şirketlerinden katılımcılar ve deneyimli eğitmenlerle birlikte uygulamalı, dünya standartlarında eğitimler sunuyoruz. Bugüne kadar yüzlerce arkadaşımız bu eğitimlere katıldı. Amacımız gerçek vaka çalışmalarından oluşan, sadece teoride kalmayan, elleri kirleterek öğreten eğitimler düzenleyerek sektöre dünya standartında ürün geliştirenler yetiştirmek. Haydi birbirimizden öğrenelim ve topluma fayda sağlayacak teknolojik ürünler geliştirelim. Kayıt aldığımız eğitim programlarımızı görmek için www.brick.institute linkini ziyaret edebilir ya da selam@brick.institute adresinden bizimle iletişime geçebilirsin. Selam Üretim Bandı dinleyicisi. Üretim Bandı aslında bir podcast'ten daha fazlası. Biz aktif bir topluluğuz. Ürün geliştirme ve şirket yönetimi ile alakalı konularda kendi aramızda konuştuğumuz ve yeni şeyler öğrendiğimiz aktif bir Slack platformumuz var. Katılmak istersen üretimbandı.com/slack linkine giderek topluluğumuza giriş yapabilir, sadece topluluğa özel oluşturduğumuz içerik ve etkinliklerden faydalanabilirsin. Unutmadan, topluluk üyeleriyle paylaştığımız 2 haftada bir yayınladığımız bültenimize de bekleriz. üretimbandı.com/bülten linkinden bültene kaydolabilirsin. Keyifli öğrenmeler. Hello everyone, welcome to Üretim Bandı's new episode. Today, my guest is Büşra Coşkuner. She's the founder of Producteer. She's a product coach, she's a product trainer, she's an educator in product management. Welcome Büşra.
Hello.
You're joining us from Zurich today?
Yes, I'm located in Zurich.
All the way from Zurich. Great to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Today, our topic is data-informed, data-driven product company, how to become one. And I think it's going to be interesting because as a product coach yourself, you've seen a bunch of different companies. And the beauty of being a product coach is that you can learn from each case and you can see the patterns and you can see the differences in the better ones, quote unquote, and the differences in like not so good ones. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. So to just give us a sense of like, let's put us a framework for our conversation. Like what would you define as data-driven, data-informed? Like, let's start from there.
You just mentioned two different words, right? Data-driven and data-informed. And I think starting here, making clear that data-driven, data-informed, and there is also something called data-inspired, but I don't get the difference, to be honest. But so data-driven is meant to only react and decide based on numbers and nothing else. Whatever the numbers say, we're going to do that. And it also means to only improve the product only based on numbers, meaning as well as goals, right? So we set a metric goal and we say, we're going to improve this metric and everything else is out of focus. And whatever we do, or whatever we decide, whichever decision we make it based on quantified information. So basically, you try to quantify everything. There's also a book, I think it's called How to Measure Everything or something like that. And people think you can measure everything. And there's also the notion of if you can't measure, you can't manage, right? So they find ways how to score X, Y, Z, and so on and so forth. And data-driven means like you really want to put a number on basically everything that is happening. Data-informed is a bit different. Data-informed also uses data to make decisions, but it leaves space for qualitative insights, or it leaves more space for qualitative insights. So data-driven also leaves some space for qualitative insights, but it's still, whenever you can score something, then score it, kind of. But here you just leave it as a poor part of your information set. You accept it as data source. That's one thing. The other thing is, yes, you look at the numbers, but you leave also space for conversations, also for gut feeling, for intuition, for, politics. They're there if you want it or not. They're always there. Some companies more than in others, but they're always there. So you leave some space for this, or for agreements that basically go against the numbers, right? So for example, I don't know, I just made an example on LinkedIn recently myself. So I created a poll and I polled 4 different topics, but the poll was poor. So if I wanted to use this as a survey and use the information from this survey to inform my decision. In a data-driven company, I would push for really hardcore, good surveys, right? So now I could say, I'm going to improve this survey and I will try better. Or like, actually, I would basically run a couple of tests to improve this survey before I send it out, right? And make it perfect. Or I say, okay, I just need a rough indication, but I still need to make sure I'm not getting too much bias into the answers. But I need some sort of input, right? So then I could use this poll and guide my intuition with that, for example. Or I could still create a new poll and try to make it better, but I don't have to stick to the results, right? So if option B was the winner, but I know that it doesn't work well with my strategy, for example, or I know that internally we have discussions and I know that people are completely against this option, even though I know I show them the numbers and say like, look guys, actually people want this option, but we still agree not to go with that option. That's completely fine. Right. So data informed just means I use data, but it not dogmatically to follow the data, but rather to inform our conversations, our discussions, and then finally make a decision based on having this as one type of input for all our conversations.
So when you look at the companies that you worked with, for example, and when you think about the ones that are ideal at a near ideal stage of being data informed, what do they look like? What do they do? Why are they different? Like in terms of their daily operations, how are they using data on a tactical level that it makes them data informed?
Yes, on a technical level, assuming you mean working on the product to make the product better, right? Basically, what they use is they have analytics set up. Front-end analytics part, like there are different tools, right? So you have Amplitude, you have Mixpanel, Google Analytics, whatever not, right? So I don't know, there's maybe Hotjar that you can use or other any kind of analytics tool that helps you to see what the user's doing on your platform with your platform. And then they have the backend analytics also in part. Backend analytics is based on all the data in the database and basically having a way to make or to get insights from what's happening on the database. For example, in an online shop, it's better to trust. So when you want to analyze sales, right? So which product has been sold, how many times, and for what price, and it's better to trust the back-end data than the front-end data, because in the back-end, we write down in the database only things that really happened, right? On the front end, you might lose this information because, I don't know, somebody blocked cookies or didn't allow cookies, somebody blocked JavaScript, somebody, I don't know, messed up while they were, like the system messed up or the shop messed up while they were going through checkout. So we have double numbers or whatever, right? So therefore you have both in place, and you ideally also have some sort of tool that can handle the back-end data, like Tableau, for example, or Metabase, I think. And with these tools, you can actually create good insight, like first of all, information. And with this information, you can create insights, right? So what's happening? And good teams I'll take this back. It's not about good or bad. Data-informed teams basically have someone who can work with the data and create insights from that. That can be the PM. That can be a user researcher who's also trained on analytics. They can have, it depends on company size and how many products they deal with, right? Like complexity in the organization and so on. But they can have a data team that, again, can look different, right? So there could be a business intelligence person. It could be a data analyst. They could be even a data scientist, a data engineer for sure, somebody who actually creates the pipelines and so on, that knows how to handle or how to create the database and so on and so forth. So it's really nice to have this kind of a data team. So I know it from my own hands-on experience. It's really nice when you have this, but you don't have to have it, right? Then in the daily operation, what they use the data for is multiple things. So when they do user research, that is already data, right? So I mentioned qualitative data is also data. And when they do user research, they have different setups, different toolings, like maybe they use Dovetail to make sense of what they have found out, or they just use a simple database. Maybe they just use a note-taking app, whatever, right? So, but the user researchers make sense of user needs. Then you might, so I'm going from strategy to down to the tactical decisions, right? Because I believe you cannot make tactical decisions only on data when you don't know about anything like strategy, right? And a product has a strategy. And to inform the strategy, again, we need data, right? So to understand if we're actually right or wrong, and to understand if we're going to the right direction, we need data. And for that, we need to understand how the users think and what their needs are, how we can actually serve them, and so on and so forth. So that's user research. We need to understand how the market is ticking and in which direction it's going, like what are the trends in the market that, any market research company can help you here. And we need to know how our product is doing in this combination, right? And these are the numbers that you can get from the front end and the back end analytics that I mentioned. So we can actually really inform the strategy. And once we have that, then we can use the strategy. We can use all the information that we get from the research and also from the analytics to prioritize what we want to actually build, make trade-offs and say, like, let's rather build this first and let's stop this one or pause the other initiative and let's see how the first one goes. We can make experiments. So this is also part of making data-informed decisions, right? I mentioned there's room for intuition, yes, but it doesn't mean you need to go blind. Intuition is something that gets formed by experience and by information and by insights. It's not something that, I had a good day today, so I slept well and I'm in a good mood. So, let's go that direction. This is not intuition. It's not. And basically, that's another part of the prioritization process, right? So get the data, but also run experiments. And for experiments as well, you need to set some success metrics and thresholds, right? And here we go back again to data. So what's the baseline? How much better should metric X perform in order to call it a successful experiment, and this kind of things, right? So data-informed teams run experiments. They find out their hidden assumptions, they write good hypotheses and pick an experiment and run tests, right? So the prioritization is informed by these tests as well as by the analytics. And here's one key thing that many teams are not doing, and this is so sad. It's really so sad. So we have learned, like through agile methodologies, we learned that the ultimate goal of a team is shipping working software. And this makes the feeling, or it gives us a feeling that our work is done once we have released it, right? But that's the wrong piece. That's like this is wrong. Our work is not done once we've released it and it's out there. Our work is done when we analyze afterwards, after a good time frame, what happened, if the feature, the improvement, whatever it is about, if the increment was successful. And here we need to define what success means, right? So, but if it was successful, if it created business value and customer value, so both of that, right? So not just one of them. And if yes, then we make the decision to keep it. If no, what should we do then, right? So making the decision after we have launched and analyzed how the increment has performed, then we can call it a day and say, like, okay, work is done. Right? But the decision has to be made and followed up on, of course, right? So if we say we kill the feature, then it needs to be killed. That's it.
So wrap up, this was a pretty good definition, at least in my mind. I think you did a great breakdown of it. First, you said the tools, the infrastructure needs to be there. You said on the front end, we'll have event analytics tools. We'll have journey tools, journey exploration tools like Hotjar. On the back end, on the production data or the database, we have the visualization tools, Power BIs, Tableaus, Metabase, all those things. You said there needs to be some sort of experimentation, and connected to that, good hypothesis creation, knowing your assumptions and knowing your unknowns, basically, and looking at things as hypothesis rather than just, a fact. You also mentioned the qualitative part of the data informed, that we should do qualitative research and get basically color into what the data is telling or not telling. And then the last thing you said was, I'm blanking.
Just one thing regarding the qualitative data. I always say numbers can tell us what is happening, but not why it's happening. And for the why, we need to talk to people. Yes, data, if you ask data scientists, so if you ask data scientists, they can have their causal So I'm not a native English speaker, so I have problems with some words. Causal
relationship, yeah.
Causal relations, thank you. It's the same with the word vulnerability.
That's a different one. That's a different case. Don't even go there.
So they can find causal relations, but not everybody has a data scientist at hand. Like, hey, come on, let's have a look at it. But so therefore, like, if you want to understand the why, you need to talk to people. Last point was about prioritization, using all of that for prioritization, and then also after releasing, analyzing
the success
what happened.
Metrics. Yep.
Exactly, success metrics, and analyzing what happened and making decisions.
Okay, so this is a big thing. Like, if you want to do all those things, this is a lot, right? Like, we painted the ideal picture, let's say. And you also mentioned, like, this goes from the strategy level to the operations level. So you can actually do many things in between, and you can do many things at each different level. But there was also one thing that you said that was interesting. So you use two words. You get the insight from the information. So in order to get the insight from the information, you need something in between. Like all these tools that we talked about, they give us the data, they give us the information. How do we turn that into insight? Like the frameworks, the mental models, like what are those? What are the analytical models that we need? And how should we look at those things? Like, let's just turn this into a case study. Like, I'm PM, regardless of my experience, in a company that has all the resources that we talked about. Information's flying to me. Qualitative and quantitative. I have all the tools I need. Let's assume that I know how to use them and I can get the data. How do I get the insight from that data?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I will have to disappoint you. There's no shortcut. So insight is basically organized and categorized information that you interpret something into. And so here's the human factor, right? So in order to turn information into insight, you have to have conversations. And that's something that many organizations, this is a surprise, but many organizations are lacking even this, right? So they are either meeting too often and talk about very unimportant things, or they don't meet enough to talk about important things. So that means when you gather information, then the next sense making part of that is coming together as a team and having a look and talking about what happened, how the information was gathered, what was the context of the information is very important, and then which conclusions to draw from this, and then also looking into more data if need be, right? There are some tools that can help you to make sense of it, or some frameworks, let's say, not tools, but frameworks. Like, for example, how you could start is, and that's a starting point that I always, you said, like, it's big, yes. So how do I start, right? So the most easy starting point is actually plotting the customer journey as a tree, not as a flow like in story mapping, but as a tree, like the whole tree that could happen, right? And then basically put the numbers to the steps where something happened. And then you already visualize gaps, either data gaps. So we haven't looked into this part, right? And now there's a big question mark. So let's look into that as well. Or you see a drop somewhere, right? And then you find out, oh, here, there's a drop. We need to look into this. And when you look into this and add qualitative data or look into Hotjar and see what's actually happening, and then you can start to have the conversation about the insight of what is happening there, and then create experiments or ideas depending on how clear you are, right? And then move forward with that. And if you want to take that into the next higher level, then you go on with another very basic framework, which is the pirate metrics. So so for everyone who doesn't know it, you can Google for it. There's lots of material on it. Pirate metrics are called pirate metrics because the acronym is AARRR, or with my best pirate voice, it's R. I love this framework.
I forgot the guy's name, but he's very
Dave
happy
McClure.
somewhere. Dave McClure. He's very happy somewhere. That
yes,
every time somebody makes that sound, I think he gets a smile on his face.
Yeah, I think so. And so you split it down into acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue. And marketing people see it as a flow, but with product people know it's not a flow, actually, right? So, they see it as a funnel, but we know it's not a funnel, it's a flow, because nobody goes through the product in a straight
linear
way, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, in a linear way. So it's some sort of a flow, and every product has its own flow, but there's like some, let's say templates that you can start with per product type. And then when you arrange those steps into the flow, for example, LinkedIn, everybody knows. I assume that everybody who listens to Üretim Bandı knows LinkedIn.
That's a fair assumption.
That's a good assumption, I think. And then when you would plot LinkedIn along the pirate metrics flow, then you would probably start with acquisition. You always have to acquire first, right? And then you use it, and at one point you stick to it. So this point that gives you so much value that you stick to it. Somewhere between this point and the first real big aha moment where it makes click and you get the value of the product is the activation part. Once you're activated, then you stick to it and come back and use it even more and more and more. That's the retention part. Then, like, depending on the use case, I still don't pay for LinkedIn, but there are people who pay for LinkedIn. So they found some sort of value in the activation and retention part that they started to pay for it, right? That's revenue. And then there's the referral part. Referral is active and passive referral. So active referral would be, hey, so it started back then. It started with people really actively inviting other people to join LinkedIn, right? So, hey, I couldn't find you on LinkedIn. Here's an invitation. Come join, right? Like it was on Facebook, for example. It started like that. Nowadays, it's more active because LinkedIn already is pretty big, right? So it's more passive. It's more about bringing people back to the platform. That's the referral part here, right? The virality. I'm writing that's what they're trying to optimize for, I think, right? So I don't know. I have my article, my newsletter on LinkedIn, and I'm writing my newsletters on LinkedIn and spreading it all over the world, and so that people actually open LinkedIn again, right? So not a different newsletter too. So now this is kind of like the referral part. So you plot your pieces. Oh, and in LinkedIn's case, after revenue, after they paid for the product, there starts another activation cycle, because now you have lots of different features that you haven't had before. And now they have to activate you one more time on these new features so that you see the value of paying and that you retain in the paid system, right? So you can basically add another loop into your flow, right? That's what I mean with every product has its own flow. And once you have plotted that, then you can talk about which part of the product is actually helping in which step of this flow. And then you can talk about which metrics will actually help us understand if the product is successful in this step. And then from all the data that you have gathered, you can map it to your flow. Or the other way around, before you have actually looked into anything, now you know what to look into, right? So now you can go very specific into your data analysis. Just want to say, like, this is the wrap it up, which is this is the second framework that helps you so much to get started.
So I think one thing that the first thing that you said was it's not that, you know, say it's not that easy, but there's perfect, basically, like, there's no one solution to get the insight because every business is different. For example, like LinkedIn is a B2C but also a B2B. It's a marketplace, but it also has a SaaS component as well. So like LinkedIn is huge, right? I mean, in terms of like the complexity, it has, like, there's no one LinkedIn flow, like there's no one LinkedIn journey. There's no one LinkedIn like customer behavior. So my bet is that at LinkedIn, there's like a huge product and data team where they basically slice and dice different types of customer segments, and they try to optimize for each of those segments.
Absolutely.
For e-commerce, for example, that's a whole different game. Like, it's journey.
Pretty straightforward, right? E-commerce is very straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta get the numbers up. You gotta get the conversion up. Basically, that's it. Like, you want to get the conversion up. You want to get the average basket size up. You want to get the returning orders up. And so it's, again, there are different segmentations in e-commerce as well. But for example, like, my background is more B2B SaaS. B2B SaaS is a totally different world, because the name of the game is to get the acquisition conversion up and keep the churn down, basically.
Yeah.
And to keep the churn down, there's, for example, a gap between, there's a mind gap, let's say, or there's like a mental gap between usage of the product by the user and the transaction. Like they
because you're not the buyer, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so the buyer and user might be different, even if they use the product, but they might churn away. So there are different mental models, and there are different ways to get the insight out from the product. So I think the first thing perhaps they can do is like, okay, what is my business like? But for example, for a junior person or a person who's recently got into a new business model, let's say, I don't want to say difficult, but it's a challenge for them to understand the entire business. Like, do you have any suggestions on how they can tackle this problem? Like, you said the first thing you said was like, get a journey, like try to figure out where the drop-offs are. And you said specifically, which I liked, you don't do it as a flow, but rather do it as a tree, so that you get like each options. Like, you don't get the happy path, but you get all the basically combinations of it, which is, I think, very helpful. But in terms of like understanding the business model, like how would you go about it? For like as a suggestion to a junior product manager?
Yeah, for a junior product manager, I would always say start small, right? Start with the area that you are responsible for, and start like really. So people would say this is bad advice, but as a starter, right? So somebody who really starts doing these things, it helps to just really focus only on your space. And in the very first step, ignore what's happening around. Just say like, okay, here's a blurb of something is happening here, but it's not my business. Here's a blurb of something's happening here, but it's not my business. So first of all, just get your stuff down so that you understand your area. You will quickly notice that understanding only your area is not enough. But you don't, so depending on the size of the product, right? So like, as you said, LinkedIn is huge. You don't have to understand every corner of the product, but you have to understand that there are interconnections with your product or with your area of the product, with other areas of the product, and they need to work well together. So once you have an understanding of your own area, then you can go deeper into the very next, the adjacent area, understand how they are working, but you don't have to go too deep into that, right? So you don't have to know the nitty-gritty details. You have to know the nitty-gritty details of your area. But you need to understand how your area affects the adjacent areas. And then working backwards, then I would work backwards and be like, okay, what's the overall business aim of this product? We tend to forget the business aim, right? So we want to always focus on product, but product is there for a reason. It's not there for being a hobby. It's there for making a business, right? So we want to make business with it. So, and then after that, I would, in the third step, start to think backwards. Okay, this is our business. What we're trying to do is we want to make money with doing XYZ. LinkedIn, we want to make money with selling ads, with LinkedIn ads, right? With the subscription. Okay, we have 4 tiers, 4 different types. Okay, each tier is very different from the other. What's included in those tiers? Understanding how we make money, right? And then finding a path from those ways of how we make money down to your product or your product area. This path, and really start easy. You don't have to understand everything right away, right? Just find one path that you understand very well. Once you have that, you can look into other paths that could also happen, right? And yes, I'm talking about happy path. And once you have that understanding, then you can also look into not happy paths, because yeah, we don't build products for happy paths, right? So we have to think end to end.
Yeah. And what do you think is the most challenging part of like becoming a data informed product person or a product team?
Changing the mindset.
Okay. Can you say more about that?
This is the very difficult part, right? Because so there are just different aspects to it. One aspect is that we as humans, we tend to jump into solutions, right? So somebody said, my chair is broken. And the first thing that we think about is, well, okay, then just buy a new chair, right? But what if we could just repair the chair? Or maybe we actually take this as an opportunity and change the whole set of chairs, right? Or instead of doing that, we actually take the opportunity and do a even more crazy mix of new chairs, right? So that not all of our chairs are the same. And yeah, so we tend to jump into solutions without thinking about why we want to actually execute on this solution. Why is this solution the best one? And what other options do we have, right? That's one thing. The other thing is wording matters. So what we observed, so I'm running a product analytics course together with Henry Latham from Prod MBA. And the thing is, I think you're running one too, right? And the thing, what we have observed is we start the course in a way that we speak data from day one. So whenever we get into a discussion where somebody, for example, jumps into a solution, we're like, okay, which data point actually gave you the inspiration for the solution? And then they're like, actually, there's no data point. I just thought it's a good idea, right? And then we're like, okay, maybe you can find a data point, right? This kind of wording matters. When you change the conversation into a type that you ask people how they came up with the idea, not necessarily demanding it, right? But just having the conversation. When you offer them, hey, let's have a look together, right? When you use the words that matter, like evidence, confidence, insights, understanding, what's the input for that, and make people talk about where actually their suggestions come from, then slowly but steadily the mindset is changing. And then there's also the conversation about outcomes. We should all be outcome driven. Well, yeah, ideally, if we want to measure if we're successful with what we're doing, it's better to measure an outcome than an output, because an output is 0 or 1. Either you have done it or not. But maybe you have taken steps until this outcome, until this output, and you could measure these steps, like looking at team success, right? Or you turn the conversation actually to your users and say, and you want to make your users successful with your product, right? So you look at the steps that the users are taking, and these are already some sort of outcomes, right? And then you start talking about these. But naturally, humans really rather talk about goals than outcomes. And that's fine. You can be like, our goal is to find a new feature that helps us with doing XY, that helps the user doing XYZ. It's fine, right? But then, okay, how do you know that you are successful? Ask this question. How do you know, or how do we know as a team that whatever we have found is going to be successful? Then the conversation starts, right? So, okay, when the user has done XYZ and we measure that they have done XYZ, then we know we were successful. Okay, great. This is a good starting point, and this works very well for experiments, right? So when you run experiments, how do you measure that you're successful? You take a metric that happens after somebody did something. But in order to measure that, you need to build it first, and that's what we don't want to do, right? So then you take a step back and say like, okay, good. When they have done XYZ, which steps are there that they could do before they get to the point, right? So which steps are there, and which of these steps can we actually see, right? And can we actually measure? So maybe there are like lots of other steps that they can do before that we can measure, so that we know, oh, this person is going to do that. Just yesterday, a friend of mine, Frederick Vosberg, just released a newsletter article, and he described exactly this situation, right? Start with a goal. Don't overcomplicate it. Start with a goal. Ask how to measure success, and then think backwards and find the steps to get there. And then make your success metric one of those.
I think the challenge, and I can hear people listening to this say in their minds, I think the main challenge is changing that mindset, not in like one individual PM, but rather in the product culture in the team. Because if the management is asking for X feature by date Y, then they're not going to hear anything else. Or the mindset of the team that's building the product is mainly focused on like features and specs and, you know, the details of the solution. So how would you go about tackling that challenge? Because as a person, I think hit the nail on the head in terms of like, yeah, we got to change the mindset, and that's the hardest part. And you got to start with the individual, and that's also a challenge on its own. I mean, changing like oneself mindset is not that easy, but let's assume that we've done that on an individual level. How do we turn that into a more scalable culture change?
Yeah. So that is even more difficult and takes a lot of time. Just to, disclaimer. There's no easy way. So once, let's say you are very clear that you want to work this way. And by talking in this way, you have already changed your team's mindset, right? So, and you and your team, you actually know you want to work this way. In the meantime, you will have conversations with your stakeholders. And in the meantime, you will already have influenced your stakeholders and at least put a seed in their head, right? To actually change a bit of the view. But again, it's a long process so that the change that the stakeholders' minds also change together with your team's minds, right? So, but you have already bigger influence out of your team. And then your manager, yes. Be careful. This is the person who decides if you are in or out.
Literally.
And what never works is challenging them and asking, why should we build this feature? This never works, because the only thing that happens is that they shut down and have you negatively in their mind, right? So, but you can slowly change the conversation by asking clarification questions. Okay, gotcha. We should build this feature. May I ask, do you have some sort of an idea how it should work or not? Or is this something that we should figure out? Very easy clarification question, right? Okay, we should figure it out. Okay, one thing that I'm thinking of is, how do we know that we find the right thing? I think we should measure this somehow, right? So that I can report to you, right? It's always about making your manager's life easier. I can report back to you that we're done. You know what? My suggestion is, I'm going to think about it and I will let you know. In the meantime, I will look how to plan it into my roadmap. So you don't say no. You just ask qualification question. In the next conversation, you come up with a suggestion, right? And that was a shortcut. So you ask more clarification question, right? So, and then the next conversation, you can be like, okay, look, regarding this feature, I have thought about it. This is how I would measure it. And the measure would be an outcome then, right? So one framework that I really love is impact mapping. And the impact map connects the business goal through the actors. It has 4 layers: business goal, actor, user outcome, and then the output. So the idea basically. And your manager talks on ideal level, the output level. And you come back with a success metric that is a user outcome. And I think if we can measure if the user has done XYZ, then we can, this can give us an understanding if we as a team made this feature in a successful way. Is that okay for you? And then you come into conversations and then your manager will be like, probably, I don't understand. How do you come up with it? And then you talk him through, this is my thoughts. This is what I think we should do, and so on and so forth. And then you get into the conversation. Chances are high that the first time you try it, he says no, or she says no, right? And is like, just build it and then it's done. Okay. Try it the next time, and so on and so forth. And I cannot tell anyone how their manager is, but that is something that you have to then figure out yourself, to find the right wording, the right time. Some managers don't like talking in the morning. They are more open in the afternoon, right? These kind of things is something that you have to know about your manager. And ideally, you also know their goals, right? They are in the company for a specific reason. And there are personal goals and business goals. Their personal goal might be, I don't know, a head of products. Personal goal might be to become the CPO, either in this company or in the next company, whatever. And they are trying to actually grow their career themselves, right? So how can you help your head of product to be so successful, to be considered as a CPO in this or another company? A business goal might be, okay, the CPO is under pressure and needs to deliver revenue. Here we go again with the impact map, right? Okay, in your team, you can think about, okay, we need to make, 10 million ARR this year. How do we do that? Okay, you think about the target groups that are important, that can actually help you achieve this goal, the user outcomes that per target group that you want to focus on, and then ideate solutions where you think, okay, this can help us to really achieve this business goal. That's forward thinking. Your manager is not forward thinking. He's backward thinking. He's thinking, okay, in our team, we have, in the management team, we said we want to achieve 10 million ARR. We're going to do that feature. Because we think this is going to convert more users into customers. So there's some sort of an outcome thinking, right? Convert more users into customers. But this is still too broad. Why should we do it with this feature, not with a different feature. Now you can take the product goal, convert X% of users into customers, and break this down in like even further, right? And come up with a different feature idea. Or in the conversation with your manager, first of all, you try to understand that this was the reason why he came up with a feature, right? This is your task now. Why this feature, right? Understand this. Don't ask this, but understand this. And if the why is the conversion rate, well, in the first place, you can say like, hey, yeah, why not? This is our success metric, blah, blah, blah. In the second place, you might come back to him and say like, look, actually in our team, we have ideated. And I told you, yes, we would build this feature and this is a success metric, but we have ideated and figured out that feature has a higher chance to convert users into customers. So why don't we try this one out? What do you think? And then you suggest them actually a different feature.
So basically
help them with the goal, right? With achieving the goal.
To make the connection between the feature and the goal, like through conversation with your manager or the upper management, let's say, try to make the connection between the feature that you've been given towards the main goal, the North Star metric, whatever you want to call it.
Business
the
goal.
Impact, the business goal, the impact that you're trying to create in the business and the customer's life. Try to make that connection through conversation and question and answer sessions, let's say.
But not through challenging, because they will kick you.
Yeah, it's a conversation. Yeah, it's a conversation. It's not a confrontation. It's a discussion between two parties, let's say. Okay, that's pretty good. That was very helpful. Büşra, this was very great. Great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I think being a data-informed product company is something that most people strive for, and they want to become those. They want to have that culture. So I think it's a good topic that we've picked, and hopefully you've given people very hands-on and, applicable suggestions throughout this conversation. I think you have, and I think people will start applying those pretty soon.
I hope so, and I'm really happy to hear about stories, good stories, bad stories, what happened when they tried to apply it. So I'd be very happy to hear about that.
Perfect. And if they want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Best way is LinkedIn. Ideally, when you send a connection request to add a personal note, then I know that it comes from this podcast, but it doesn't have to be, right? So LinkedIn is best. Otherwise, you can also subscribe to my newsletter on my blog. Just freshly added a newsletter subscription form. I've always had a blog, but never a subscription form. So you can also subscribe to that. Otherwise, also reach out to me through my website, the contact form. But the easiest is really LinkedIn, and that's also the most personal one, and that's what I prefer.
Perfect. Thank you, Büşra. Ağzına sağlık, as we say in Turkish. And thank you to everyone who's listening. See you at the next episode.
Thank you very much.